weekend called The Three Man Project, Full Bloom. Believe it or not, it came out of Europe, but it was made by North Americans. And it's a dance piece for men over 40, about men over 40. And it was so moving and so compassionate and so wise as they looked at the various things that are involved in manhood issues over 40, be it fatherhood, be it war, be it accepting responsibility. And everyone could relate to it, women, men, people of all ages. So if something spreads a freshness on your viewpoint, like how many productions of Hamlet have I seen? 13, 15, 20? But if I hear a line that I know so well, and I hear it with fresh ears, or if I'm at an opera and I hear something in the music I've never heard before because something on stage is happening to make that, then it's a thrill for me. Mm-hmm. So art can speak again and again and again with utter freshness.
What do you think of musicals coming on television, such as Glee? Have you heard of Glee?
No, what's Glee?
I
mean, what I know about pop culture, please forgive me, can fit into a thimble.
Basically, it's like a musical on television where they do dance, they sing, and it's drama all wrapped in one.
Like South Pacific? West Side Story?
Yes,
Band?
it's something along those lines, yes. And they have it on television, and they do various episodes. So what do you think about musicals coming on television?
Well...
And how that might change and inspire more people to come into the arts?
Well, you can argue, do people go to dance because of So You Think You Can Dance? You know? Mm-hmm. Do people go to musicals because how do you solve the problem like Maria, if you know about that show, where they hunted for the person to play Maria in The Sound of Music and put literally an untried person in a key role. I think that anything that acquaints people with the arts in any way is good. Because quite frankly, if we look back at previous centuries, what defines those centuries? Do you know who the greatest sports figure was in the 19th century? I sure as hell don't know. But I certainly know about the literature and the music and the art. And the great tragedy is that the fine arts define our culture. And in North America, we don't seem to realize that. Let me give you one example. From the moment somebody thought the Raptors and the Leafs needed a new home, the Air Canada Centre, from the moment somebody conceived it, which meant getting the land, getting the architect, raising the money, was 3.5 years. It took us 30 years to get an opera house, barely.
Wow.
And so I guess my whole philosophy is that I champion the fine arts because that represents the finest in us. And I hope one day everybody does come to them. But if people are getting musicals, then maybe they might want to go out and find out what My Fair Lady was. You know, if they're interested in this musical on, you know, on Glee, is it? Like Glee Club, that kind of Glee?
Yeah, it's basically about a Glee Club in high school and how they're overcoming the trials because it's the sports that are getting the most money in the high school because everybody loves sports and nobody cares about the music. And now they're winning all these awards, trying to bring back music into the high schools.
Well, that sounds absolutely commendable.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that at all.
I think Ken has something to say. Ken?
Well, actually, I do, because I worked for the National Ballet of Canada for 20 years.
Okay.
And
what did you do for them, Ken?
I was a fundraiser, and so I took the situation to people. I was selling subscriptions, a number of things. And I found that the ballet audience itself is very resistant to the idea of anything moving forward. And as a matter of fact, you know, that's why we are always putting on Romeo and Juliet and Swan Lake. The Nutcracker has to be danced every Christmas. If you think about that as an art form, you know, it's also a commercial business. It's a charity that runs on a budget of something like, what, $26 million a season. $26 million a season is a lot of money for a charity. So there are people out there who put a value on the art, but at the same time it's rife with its own conspiracies. And as a matter of fact, I could cite the famous James Kudelka, Kimberly Glasgow situation as being...
Don't go there.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely, because I think there was points on both sides, you know, but once Kimberly had sort of lost her front office appearance, it was a lot easier to manipulate the situation, I think. And, you know, there's always going to be politics in everything that we do, and
Well,
so
let's
art
pick-
doesn't stay pure
Okay,
and fine.
but let's pick up on the first thing that you said. And that's a very valid point, and I cannot refute it, that much of the audience of the arts tends to be very conservative. In other words, there's a great theory that opera is moving backwards. You keep finding earlier and earlier operas to put on, but opera isn't really moving forward, because how many of the new operas that are being written find a place in the repertoire? I give you that. But you also have to remember that people booed La Boheme on its first performance. And now it's absolutely part of the repertoire. So yes, there is a very strong conservative nature within the arts. But
Sure.
if that piece of art has legs, it will hold.
Well, then you'd think that at some point the National Ballet of Canada would put up the Rite of Spring. I mean, it was booed.
But they do. They did. They did Glenn Tetley's Rite of Spring.
Well, they did Tetley's, yeah.
I mean, my God, Karen Kane did a program of great risk of 3 new original Canadian works, and it wasn't great at the box office. Critics loved it, and the audience that went. So, I mean, give this woman credit for what she's trying to do.
Oh, absolutely. Karen Kane is probably one of the best artistic directors that the company's seen in some years since probably Reed Anderson, as a matter of fact. I think, you know, that it's a very daunting task to try and make the balance between keeping ballet comfortable and at the same time breaking new ground.
But let's look at popular culture. Go to Broadway. And when I don't go to New York for theater anymore. There is nothing there that I want to see unless I go off Broadway or off Broadway. You've got retreads of every musical that was ever known. And when you used to go and see plays like Equus or Amadeus, I mean, think about the great theater that used to be able to, Angels in America, you know, all 3 parts. And now there is nothing of interest. So even within the popular culture, it's, you know, retro. So,
Well,
but still, people soldier on. People still try and be creative, and I think it's my job to encourage that creativity. If I didn't feel it was there, I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be playing bridge somewhere.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I have to be a champion of the fine arts. I have to be. Because that is what defines the best in us.
But maybe that's part of the problem sometimes, you know, is that there's a separation between what is known as fine arts or the legitimate stage and then everything else. And there's a sort of class distinction that comes along with that. In other words, if I was an actor but didn't have the depth to do Shakespeare, maybe I wouldn't be interpreted as a completely legitimate actor.
Oh, no. I don't think we do that. I have just as much praise for people who aren't graduates of the National Theatre School as I do. And I finally thought of James Kudelka's piece, oh, God, Désir.
Oh, yes.
Right? Do you remember it?
Yeah.
It's just, it's a dance to Prokofiev waltzes, and it's about 8 couples and their relationships with one another, and each one is different. And it's all done through the choreography of partnering. And the audiences loved it in German, but the German critics creamed it. So that's going back to my first point about the Atlantic is widening and not getting smaller.
And yet you're saying and I want to get back to I'll get your idea about where culture is headed, because as you say, the fine arts define where our culture is at. The Atlantic's getting wider, yet the German audiences loved this particular performance, but the critics didn't.
That's right.
And also New York. You don't like New York because it's all rehashed.
The Broadway, the
Broadway,
major
okay.
commercial. In other words, because the bottom line has become the main line in theater, well, main line in anything.
Except in Europe.
Well, but they're beginning to start to lose their subsidization. Like a lot of the, this recession has hit, the European companies, and they are also, suddenly they've got to start thinking about what's happening with the box office. It's making them think twice, too. Mm-hmm. And I guess my major feeling is that I have to champion risk. Yeah. Those people that do take risks, because or the people that will underwrite risks. Because the thing that happened on Broadway, of course, is that it was so expensive to put on a show that if it didn't do well, if you didn't have a guaranteed audience, people weren't taking that risk.